Anna Huber is here for 2 weeks for the length of March Dance, working intensely with dancers in a workshop situation, but also presenting her work, whose title I'm not going to pronounce. So Anna, could we start perhaps there with the title of the work and what can you translate this for us somehow?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm very happy to be here again, and I will actually the main part of my time here is to share the workshop, and just right in the middle of these 2 weeks I do a solo performance, Unsichtbarst, which is also in German is a kind of an impossible title, because it means unsichtbar, which means invisible, and Unsichtbarst would be invisiblest, even more invisible than invisible, which is of course not possible. It's kind of an impossibility, and it was also the idea of this kind of most invisible, that it gets extremely visible and extremely exposed. So I was playing with this. I was playing with the impossibility, but also, so what is visible and what is not visible? What do you show? What do you hide? What do you expose?
Yeah.
And so on.
And having read the text of the performance and knowing a little bit, though I don't want to give away the surprise of how the dance is played out, it seems to me there's a sort of a preoccupation with thinking about the idea of gaze and the ideas of what does the body actually become, what is a sculptural body, or what is the body as object. And interestingly, it's been a large part of also the discourse here, in the 80s already, when Chandra started to modernize, Bharatanatyam. The whole idea of the gaze was a very important part of the discourse, because the female body was so objectified and so forced into a kind of a seductive, powerful scenario. But in the context of where you come from, which is really first ballet and then certain kind of Western contemporary training, when did this preoccupation with gaze or with the position of the body itself in performance, where does that come from for you, briefly?
I think in my work it was from the very beginning, in my own artistic work, so not working for other choreographers, but taking the responsibility for my choreographical and artistic work myself. It was from the very beginning on a big question about also like the question, what is form and what is not form? How do I was always not interested in just presenting a perfect form or shape, or however you want to call it. I was much more interested in the question, like actually the form questioning itself, or a body questioning itself. And this was from the very beginning of my personal artistic work, and it goes on till now, maybe even more extreme.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the staging here of the work is 20 years after premiere, in itself quite an unusual task. However, the idea of re-performance seems to be gaining momentum, and perhaps this has to do with certain ideas that the market is saturated. Perhaps it has also to do with the point that dancers today in Europe are really a little bit at a loss in certain ways of where to take dance and form, especially. But for you, why this re-performing or the restaging, and how do you see it?
It's interesting, especially with this. It's a solo work, first of all, and it was I created it 1998 in Berlin in a museum space. It was my first work. I really deliberately stepped out of a theater space, and I wanted to perform it in a non-theater space, which later got something really involved, like site-specific work. but in a different way, where I was much more connected also to, or related to architectural space. But it was a very important decision at this time to say, I don't want to do this premiere, to create this new solo in the theater, but I want to step out of the also traditional classical stage audience relationship. And this was actually clear from quite early on that it's performed on a square, just like on a very limited space, 5 on 5 meters. The audience is sitting on all 4 sides, so that it's this extremely exposed situation.
Yes.
And in the same time, when I was creating this piece, like 20 years ago, it was my, I could say, like my third solo piece. Well, it was my 5th piece, but my third bigger one, like full evenings length performance. And already then I really questioned every step, every form. I was questioning till coming to a really almost like a 0 point where I thought, well, everything is already done. Even if I'm just standing there for 1 hour or laying on the floor for 1 hour,
exactly.
Then you're in a performance art, of the 60s, 70s.
And also I think for us it's really nice the idea of looking back at something, because it's very much a part of tradition here, but also that this kind of the obsession with newness, and all the time wanting every choreographer feeling a pressure to constantly reinvent, some even making 3 new performances every year. It seems to have no meaning. But we finish with one last question.
Yes.
Do you have something more to say?
Yeah, because just to finish this solo, which I performed, so I created it 20 years ago. I was performing it for 10 years and touring it a lot. I was even performing it once in Delhi, and I was touring it a lot abroad, and it was especially interesting, of course, like the gaze, how it's also in a different cultural context.
Absolutely.
How you look at each other, also like in a daily situation, not only on stage. And this, for me, is just also highly inspiring, and even also, of course, it stays a question. And what with this piece, it was actually an invitation from a French dance house, dance festival, to rework this, to have performances with Unsichtbarst, with this piece. So I was really asking myself, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this work, like to rework a piece I did 20 years ago, was performing it for 10 years, and then since 10 years didn't dance it anymore. And I realized that just because it's this specific performance where already as a young dancer I was questioning so much, like what is shape, what is form, is it possible to lose form, is it possible to be formless, well, that's another meaning, or almost like an amorphous body, a melting body. And what I think is interesting, of course, we're all aging. I mean, everybody is aging. That's one of the things. We're not.
We can't escape.
Nobody is not aging, and I think it's really interesting, especially with this solo work, to confront also myself with another. I'm 20 years older. That's a lot, and to see what changed, but also in a very I try, like in a very open-minded way, also embracing changes, transitions, transformation was already, when I did create the piece as a young dancer, this idea of transformation, constant transformation was already a very important issue. So therefore I thought it makes sense to see how it's now.
Okay, nice. To end, when we first invited you to Chennai, and this is already your 4th visit.
I think so.
So you have some familiarity, and there've already been some conversations with dancers in the city, which is nice because we feel that you have the gazes in 2 directions between us. Not just us viewing you in performance, but you also throwing your gaze on the dance context of the city. And so we invited you, saying, we want you here for 2 weeks, which is lovely of you to have made this time, because we're so used to artists coming and leaving quickly that we don't ever get this moment of sharing process. And you've been here already for a week in conversation with 15 dancers, and you stay for a week after. And do you feel that as a festival in our thinking, this March Dance especially, that we've achieved somehow, in a way, the idea of sharing process, and that we haven't reduced the idea of festival to just product?
Yeah, I highly appreciate this. I must say I'm very impressed also by the diversity, the open-minded attitude of all the participants, coming from very different backgrounds, very different experiences, different ages also, but everybody is so curious in the best sense, open-minded, available, interested, and that's just, I think that's the only thing which is maybe necessary to start together into a process.
Yes, absolutely. And to get into performance as well.
Yes.
In the watching of it.
Yes.
Yes.
It will be a very different perspective for all of us, I think. And it's also then my task now to make the shift, like from sharing something in a very, for me, on a same level, like sharing ways of processing and experiencing, and then doing a performance which is already written, which is set in a very different context. I'm curious. It's also a process by itself.
Absolutely. But thank you for giving us the time.
Thank you.
And we look forward. So enjoy the performance, everyone.